The Yael Foundation is a Jerusalem-based philanthropic organization focused on strengthening Jewish identity and education worldwide. Naomi Kovitz is its Chief Operating Officer. Welcome to the JNS Jerusalem Media Hub, Naomi. Tell us a little bit about the Yael Foundation.
Thank you so much for having me here. The Yael Foundation started 5 years ago by Uri and Yael Polyavich. Since the beginning, their mission was very clear. How do we get more Jewish kids involved in their Jewish identity? And I think when they sought out to figure out what avenue would work best for them, they understood that schools, places of education, are the best path forward. Initially, when they started the foundation, they said, well, what are the biggest challenges in these schools and what is nobody else funding? And they were told overhead, salaries. And they said, great, we're going to do what nobody else is doing. That kind of led us into where we are today. Today, we have global reach and currently support over 130 schools in 45 countries, various educational programs, whether it's day schools, including primary schools and high schools, kindergartens, Sunday schools, after-school programs in all of these locations. Our funding today is much more, we are not funders, we are investors. We invest in the schools that we support. We view each and every grant as an investment, and every single one of our grant managers has a portfolio in a strategic area and location, and they view it as that.
So tell me a little bit more about the funders of the foundation and the founders.
Yeah, so they have a very interesting and unique story. And we've been privileged to hear a few times from them about their journey in this. They are self-made, which is fantastic, their determination and their drive to really succeed. And Uri actually once told us the story when their business was in its infancy and things weren't going as well. They had already maybe started giving some tzedakah money or some support to a specific school, and things were kind of rocky. At some point, they figured, let's cut our losses and close the business. And they kind of had a conversation amongst themselves, and they said, well, what about the other kids, our kids that we're supporting in this school? And then since then, they've kind of plowed forward with this determination to make this work at all costs. And it's really paid off.
And your office is in Jerusalem. And how did you come on board?
Wow, interesting story, actually. I think that Uri and Yael, once they saw that the foundation was going to grow to the scale that it is, understood they needed some restructuring and professional people at the helm. Chaya Yosovich, our CEO, was hired. Her first day was actually October 9th, 2023. So that discussion was, let's see which schools need security, need some more security guards, armed guards. No Jewish child or no Jewish family should be scared to send their kids to school. And she called me about a month into the war saying, Naomi, we have to meet. And I said, I live in Rehovot. We had constant bomb, sirens, alarms. And it was a challenging period. But she said, no, we have to meet. We met. And she said, I've been in this role for the past month. And I realized that I really need you here by my side. And the rest is history. So.
And what is your personal story before we get more into the foundation?
So I grew up in the United States in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I am the fourth generation American. My family kind of skipped over the Ellis Island story and in 1899 settled in Newark, because we all know that Newark used to be a Jewish place. And on my mother's side, I'm actually 10th generation Israeli, so very, very strong roots and identity. And I've always been involved professionally in international programs, educational programs, on the operation side, the visionary side, the leadership side. How do we connect all of these things together? How do we bring people together to the table with this vision in mind and actually practically get it going?
Mm-hmm. And you recently had a very successful conference, I understand, in Vienna, Austria. Tell me more about that and what was achieved there.
Right. So the Yale Awards is our kind of highlight event of the year, aimed towards heads of schools and communities, educators. As you can imagine, 45 countries, 130 schools, many of them feel very, very siloed. In a geographic distribution, you could have two countries that are neighboring countries and maybe just the geographic distance of New York and New Jersey, but they are worlds apart from a regulatory component, from an educational component, from a cultural component, from a language component. And their opportunities to kind of share and talk to their peers are few and far between. The whole gathering, our whole ability to bring them together really and create a space for them to share ideas, to think about solutions, to bring up problems, to help them form these connections is just incredibly impactful. And we do this all under the title of the Yael Awards. And the Yael Awards is, I would say, the Emmys of Jewish education. We want it to be that way. It should be celebrated on the highest of levels, with every single detail taken into consideration, because Jewish education matters. This matters, and it has to be done on a very, very high level. And that is kind of our message to the schools that we support. Everything you do has to be excellent. Everything you do, the details have to be there, and the vision has to be there.
The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit is coming up this April the 15th through 17th, once again at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. I'll be there, and I really hope you'll join us too. You can visit jns-summit.org to register and to see the speaker lineup. It's an exceptional group this year. I look forward to meeting you in Jerusalem this April. I know this is asking the obvious question, but why does it matter?
I think that education in every social construct it's like a fixture. It's like a built-in part of our life. And it's there. And it could be there or it could be there, right? Where do we want it to actually be? And in today's day and age, and we all know this with the recent Super Bowl ads, and it's been a topic of heated discussion on this war of antisemitism. Really, how far can we go? We can't control what people say about us. We can't control how people act towards us, but we can control what we know about ourselves. And we want to encourage children, teenagers, families, communities to step into their Jewish story, to take on their identity, not be bystanders, to really take a part of the Jewish narrative and to understand how it's relevant in their lives. Whatever practical aspect that takes, it doesn't matter. That's not the goal. The goal is to give opportunities for knowledge, for belonging, for connection, and just for communication with each other.
Tell me, if you can, about a success story or something that's a story that stands out in your mind about how successful the foundation is when it comes to educating Jewish kids.
Wow. So there are, thank God, really so many. We can think of various models where we helped with initial seed money to, let's say, a school in Latin America where kindergarten, the cost of tuition was a barrier for parents to send their kids to school. And we ended up funding the first few years of kindergarten, so that tuition was free. And then once parents were in the door and they saw the school and they connected with the leadership there, then they were much more, they decided to stay. And the school increased their enrollment by a tremendous amount. I can tell you about other schools where they were stuck in their place. They were just in a specific place and they felt like they were cornered, or they didn't know how to continue with kind of very specific, I don't want to go into too many details, but with the support of the Yael Foundation, and not just the financial support, really kind of the back that we give and the backbone, the leadership and the guidance that we give all of our grantees allowed them to take a step back and look at the problem differently and create some interesting solutions that were better with resources, much more educational, higher excellence, and incorporating a fantastic Jewish experience.
Could you outline some of the programs that the Yale Foundation and you supervise?
So we are investors and grant makers, as I said, in 130 educational programs in 45 countries. And we're also in the process of developing something called the Yael School Network, which is right now focused on starting premier international Jewish schools in both Cyprus and in Portugal. And these are supposed to be models of excellence. And we want to try to identify places that have zero Jewish education or no presence of Jewish schools, and create the cream of the crop in Jewish education there.
How does the grant process actually work?
So we have an application on our website. It's pretty straightforward. We aim to be as non-bureaucratic as possible. We are very big on quick turnaround and quick thinking. And we hopefully, and part of my role is putting these processes in place that don't impede a process, but rather streamline it. We have a team of grant managers, and each one has a geographic focus, has an understanding of the lay of the land. And they're the ones who screen through the application forms to try to understand where is their good leadership. You need somebody on the ground to work with, right? and where there's potential for growth, or unfortunately, in some cases, where there's a big hole in a bucket in the bucket, and we want to help plug that hole. Retention is a very big focus for us also, because unfortunately, this day and age, Jewish education isn't obvious. And so we work on both fronts, both in increasing enrollment and both in retention.
So can you give me an example of where you see lacking a big hole, as you call it? How do you go about then filling that hole?
So I think there's kind of two factors. If you take a place like France, there's a push-pull factor. There's a very strong push factor out of public schools because of the rise in antisemitism, and their schools are bursting at the seams. So we have a school right now that we're in touch with that has a 600 child waiting list.
Wow.
Can you imagine 600 children? Like that's crazy. So that's a place where it's not really a hole to be plugged, but it's a hole in the system. There's something more systematic here that needs to be addressed. In other places where maybe they're less traditional and the Jewish school started out as maybe like a schoolhouse or a community run, and it's not at that level, then they're just losing kids to the international school. They're losing kids to the public schools because maybe they have fantastic quality. Maybe for the same cost of tuition, they feel like they're getting more bang for their buck. The parents, I mean, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our job we see it as our role is to invest in these schools to make sure that they're up there and can meet the demands of the parents on the ground.
And besides reading JNS stories, how can people find out more about the Yael Foundation and the good work that you do?
I think that the work itself speaks for itself. Wherever you live and wherever you see your Jewish community, hopefully we're there also giving some more support. Again, we're necessary. Some communities are thriving on their own. You can follow us on social media and visit our website to kind of keep up to date to the ongoings of the Yael Foundation, and hopefully it'll be inspiring for everyone.
It's a really terrific website, which I've been studying, and I really do recommend, but should we give the actual address?
Sure. It's www.yaelfoundation.org.
Okay, and you seem to really enjoy this work, and it's obviously very important. What is your vision for the future and the foundation's vision?
Yes, it is a huge privilege to be able to work for the Yael Foundation. Tremendous responsibility, but a huge privilege. And I'm going to quote Uri Poliavich, who just recently said, "We are overachievers." So our vision to the future is to overachieve in everything that we do, whether it's the standard of excellence, whether it's intense and meaningful Jewish experiences, where it's careful investments in Jewish education, and that's our way forward.
And, you mentioned that you're working on some new projects. What are you currently working on? Is there something that I haven't mentioned that you'd like to talk about?
Yes. So we have Camp Yael. This past summer, we had 500 students from 19 countries. So I don't know if you can imagine the situation for a minute. Camp literally happens in 4 languages simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one unifying language. I think it's an incredible experience for kids. And the whole idea is to give them that place where they feel so immersed in their kind of Jewish story, and they have that opportunity to also connect with their peers. You would think that in this globalized world we live in, with people being able to connect on social media, sometimes they say, like, we didn't even know there were kids in any other country, fill in the blank, in Iceland, in Finland. And it's such an eye-opener for them. And then the kids from the smaller communities, they feel like, wow, we're part of this much larger Jewish story. We're part of this much larger picture. And we don't feel alone. We feel there's a much broader network here behind us. The relationships that are formed at camp are unbelievable. And not only that, the benefits to the schools that actually send kids to camp, because it's really hard to get into. But the kids come back to the school with this sense of leadership and ownership that is huge for the school itself and for the community itself.
So these camps are subsidized by the Yael Foundation, and where do they actually take place?
So we have we choose a location every year, and we rent a campground, and they come to us. So it's one camp for the Yael Foundation, and it's heavily subsidized. And as I said, it's hard to get into because we really want those kids who wouldn't ordinarily go to Jewish camp, and this could be really a transformative experience for them.
Absolutely. So what is your message to people who are watching this interview in terms of what you've learned in your job and where we're going in the future as we face, growing anti-Semitism around the world? It hasn't been a simple situation since October 7, 2023, as you yourself mentioned.
Yeah, so I would split my answer into two. I think first on a professional level, I think it's very easy to look at things maybe with American blinders or Israeli through an Israeli lens, right? And I think that's something that I have had to think about in my work, although I've always had dealings internationally. But when it comes to education, I remember one of my first site visits, I had those thoughts that snuck into my head that said, well, why didn't they do it this way? This is the way I grew up. They should have do it this way. And then understanding that really each and every city and each and every location, especially when it comes to Europe, has such an interesting Jewish story and Jewish history and Jewish culture that really influences the decisions that they make. And I think it has to be celebrated and respected. And both sides of the Atlantic have a lot to learn from each other and can really, I think, if we're able to bring them all together to learn from each other, that's just absolutely amazing. I think the second component is just kind of going forward, really making sure that the Yael Foundation continues to be a model of excellence, continues to be the driving force, and making sure that communities, schools, leaders, educators, and every single Jew in the world ultimately steps into their story, takes ownership of their Jewish identity, however that may take place, and really understands that that's really the only gift we can give to the next generation of Jews is a strong, solid, committed understanding of who we are and how we are this nation together.
Naomi Kovitz, thank you so much for joining us. It's an inspiration what you do, and I'm sure people would like to learn more.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.